Well, hey guys, welcome to the studio. Today we have swapped from PC over to a Mac Mini. This is an M2 Pro. It went pretty smoothly, and I gotta say, the software that I run for the studio here is just gliding effortlessly on this thing. It did take a little bit of work. If you're thinking you might want to switch from a PC over to one of these new Macs, there's a few things that I can hopefully shed some light on so that you're not caught off guard. Let's get to it. Now, the thing I started with was the basics. I went to add my DAW first. I run Ableton Live 11 Suite. Installed no problem. Next step, getting the plugins. And here's where you're going to run into a little bit of mysteries. First off, Apple actually provides some AU plugins that work in Ableton, and these things just kind of automatically loaded up. I have no idea where they came from. I have not tried any of them, but I guess they're associated with maybe GarageBand, which is on a Mac. Or maybe they come from Logic. Who knows? But they're there. Or give them a try. Next up, IK Multimedia. I'm really only running Tonex software from them. Loaded right up. No problem. Native Instruments. I have the Ultimate Collector's Edition of Complete 13, which is roughly 2 terabytes of download. Figure on about 24 hours using 300 megabit per second download. It does hang up from time to time. You have to keep your eye on it and make sure that the downloading process is continuing. Softtube we use for Console 1, no problem. It did have me re-verify the iLok on the cloud. You just need to be prepared for that type of thing. Waves, which I had a bundle and a few independent things, they wanted to charge me for every single plugin that I owned. I ended up paying $20 and just activating the Waves Tune RT, which is the only one that I really kind of think is worth $20. The rest of it, I'm just letting it go in the trash. But that's Waves for you. Next up was the hardware I needed to make this stuff work. The complete S88 Mach 2. I have a Push 2 from Ableton, a couple of Akai controllers, various different things around the studio, including the Softtube Console 1. When I tell you this stuff is plug and play, this stuff is literally plug and play. I did not have to install any drivers. Mac just immediately recognized it, came right up in Ableton. Everything, literally upon plugging it in, fully worked. The only catch to that was in Complete Control from Native Instruments. It did want to be run as a standalone first, so it could scan the libraries. But as soon as it was done doing that, it was no problem to bring it up in Ableton. So no real catch on any of that, the hardware stuff. Now, I didn't really want to talk about any hard numbers or comparisons of the RAM or the processing speed. As it turns out, in my humble estimation, that stuff is largely meaningless. And the reason why I couldn't even begin to understand. I'm sure technical people could tell you why. Okay, so here's the contact library. I do want to show you one little stress test here. This is one of the reasons I wanted to get out of PC and try going over to Mac. One of these instruments here is called Farlight, and there's a few instruments like this in Native Instruments that would bog down my CPU something terrible. This particular instrument, Farlight, was driving my CPU, a single note of it, up to about 60% of my CPU usage, as told to me by the Ableton CPU impact up here. You currently see this hanging around 5%. I know it's hard to see. Well, If I played a single note, that would jump up to about 60, which meant that I was freezing the track or had to re-render it or something. And if I played more than one note, it was worse. Well, let me play you a single note in Farlight on this system. And I think we got up around 20%. Not too bad. Let me play a handful of notes. And I think we saw it go up to about 28%. But there's one huge difference. When I was running Farlight in Ableton on the PC, I had a buffer size set to 1024. If I ran it down to 512, I was getting glitching and popping because the buffer size and the amount of the CPU that I was putting stress on. When I was doing this test on the Mac, however, and I had a handful of keys on Farlight to see how it would hit the CPU, that was at a buffer size of 128. If I had attempted that on PC, there's no way I could have even gotten anything but just noise and static out of it. That is the thing that makes the Mac have value for me. And I'll tell you why. I was compromising my productions, trying to safeguard my PC from having problems. And I would increase my buffer size, and that would increase latency. And so I was just not a happy camper. I would have to either choose things that I didn't want for my production or freeze tracks in Ableton or increase my buffer size to get a production to happen. And in this studio, I do this for a living. I want the best possible experience, and I don't want to compromise my productions. So far the Mac has fixed all those issues. So the things that were giving me an issue before I even decided to move over to a Mac was the software compatible with Mac, or did I have to run some kind of Windows emulation in a Mac to get it to run, which I didn't want. And at this point, Ableton and the plugin companies that I deal with, they're running Mac Silicon compliant stuff, so that's okay. My second issue was some of my hardware does not like to be run through a hub. And that might be true on a PC. However, these Thunderbolt 4 ports on this thing have so much bandwidth that even if you're running a big hub on them, the shared bandwidth is not really a problem. I am running 2 cameras on this system and everything else. Nothing is bottlenecking on the USB with about 15 things plugged in. So that question is solved. Now, to get all this hardware connected, I had about 15 USB connections that I needed to make into this thing. Your only real choice is to run hubs. Now, there's Thunderbolt ports on the Mac Minis. The regular Mac Minis have 2 Thunderbolt ports. If you move up to the Pro, they do have 4 Thunderbolt ports, and these are like USB on steroids. You can add a hub. Even your hardware that does not like to be run through a hub will, in my experience, did not have a problem. And that includes things like my interface, the XR18. Also the Push 2. These are things that really did not like being run through a hub on a PC. Well, when you're looking for hubs because you need a bunch of USB, a couple things to look for. Number one, make sure that it's USB-C, that's the size of the jack of Thunderbolt 4, so USB-C, and that it has the connectivity that you need, probably a bunch of USB-A ports, and you might want to get one that has an additional HDMI output in case you want to run a second monitor. In this case here, I'm running it on 2 monitors, and I'm still running a PC down here, but it was very important for me that I had the ability to connect 2 HDMI monitors, and so I just used one of these ports, and everything worked just fine. And keep that in mind. So there's a lot to talk about. I didn't get into too much depth, but if you do have questions, you can post them here, and I will probably answer you. Or you can head over to our Facebook group, Recording Tips. And we have an ongoing discussion there that's paralleling what you're seeing here about what questions people have before they make a decision to swap over to a Mac. Very in-depth stuff. You should come join us. Anyway, we got a lot of work to do. Let's get to it.